If you like this channel and what I do here, please help to support my work by checking out one of my books, available from Lulu Publishing and Amazon.com. Thank you. Hi folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness. Welcome to another Rewatchable. I'm joined today, as always, by Dan Ryan. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
Good.
Lovely and warm today.
Yes, yeah, that's why we're in the shade.
Yeah.
Another bit of spot, socially distanced again.
Of course,
requisite 2 meters. We've watched 3 pilots from the basically Rick Berman era of Star Trek, post Gene Roddenberry, co-created by Rick Berman. All 3 of these. And the first is the Deep Space Nine pilot, Emissary. The second is Voyager, the Caretaker. And the third is Enterprise, Broken Bow.
Yes.
So we're going to start with Deep Space Nine. Interesting story. What did you think?
I thought, it's quite a slow episode. And the actual episode doesn't have very much story. And it focuses on Sisko's character.
Yeah.
Which was probably a good decision.
Yeah.
Different to the others.
Yeah. It's interesting because of all the Deep Space Nine, Deep Space Nine is my favourite Star Trek show. And when knowing what I know about where Deep Space Nine goes, it's very sedate as an introductory episode to a Star Trek series. And you're right, the focus is very much on Benjamin Sisko. It does set up a lot of the situation with, the Cardassian withdrawal from Bajor, the space station discovery of the wormhole, that it's also the home of the prophets, the prophets that worshipped by the Bajoran people, introducing all the characters as well, Major Kira, but none of the characters really get that much of an introduction, do they? It's only sort of tokenistic, really. Yeah. We know that Major Kira is, fiercely patriotic and fighting for Bajoran independence and that. We know that Odo is a bit of a mysterious creature. He doesn't know where he came from. Yeah. We know that Bashir is a bit green round the gills, eager to get going. A little bit about Jadzia, that she's she's from a joint species, the Trill, and that Curzon was a previous host, and Quark really is just the bartender, the community leader and all that. Really, and O'Brien, really there's not much of anything with O'Brien. He's already an established character from Next Generation. He's just kind of there, gets the lines. But the only real major thing of that story, like you say, is Jake, is Benjamin Sisko, and to some degree Jake as well. And it's a fascinating story. We've talked before about this idea about how certain people today talk about how there's it's only recently that Star Trek's had any inclusion and equality and diversity and all that kind of thing. But this is like early to mid 90s, early 1990s, and you have a black single dad raising his son on his own, grieving the loss of his wife from 3 years previously, never coming to terms with it properly. It's a proper character study, and it's a great episode in terms of character development, in terms of really rounding out character. And there is so much more development with Sisko as the series goes on. It's only, in terms of where the series takes him, it's a little sketch of Sisko in that first episode. But it sets it up really, really well.
Yeah, because it's not just you being told something he already knows. In that episode, he himself discovers that
for himself, look for solutions from within, and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Like he thinks he's being taken everywhere, but it's him subconsciously taking himself there over and over again. You exist here.
When they say to him, the prophets do, don't they? It's you keep taking us to these places. This is you. This is what defines you. Your love of your son, his interest in baseball, things like that. Yeah. And ultimately, the loss of his wife. He cares deeply about being a Starfleet officer and being in Starfleet and that. But it's very sort of much more human in the respect that your job, your career, or your sort of path in life doesn't define you.
Yeah.
That there are other aspects to you, and Sisko is very much, a family man. He cares deeply for his son. He'll do anything for his son. He loves Jake. So much. I mean, she's great. That's really positive. A real positive message, and good fathers as well. It's not something that's frowned upon now. It's like in any kind of fiction, to have this really strong, nurturing, encouraging, supportive father. There's an episode later in Deep Space Nine where Sisko says to Jake, we'll train you up with Chief O'Brien, it'll look great on your application to Starfleet Academy. And he goes off and starts doing some tinkering about doing some jobs with O'Brien. He comes back later in the day and he sits down and he says, I don't want to join Starfleet. And Sisko says, since when? And he says, since always. He says, Starfleet's you, I want to be my own person. And Sisko says, great, as long as you do something that makes you happy, I'll support you.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. I mean, that is, that is real good, So anything else? I mean, I've been jabbering on about it. I could speak eternally about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but is there anything else that you wanted to?
You also get a nice little teaser at the start of the episode.
Ah, yes.
Of the battle.
Wolf 359. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you didn't see any before.
Yeah.
But you get to see some of that.
Some of it. Yeah. So apparently it was quite expensive to shoot at the time, but it looks quite tame. Quaint compared to, but still, 3 or 4 starships, and all that kind of great stuff. Yeah. Locutus of Borg, and Patrick Stewart in it as well, and that's something else that we talked about, didn't we?
Yes.
The interplay between Sisko and Picard.
Well, they use Picard to show how he's changed throughout the episode, because early on he blames Picard for killing his wife.
Clearly, it's obvious, isn't it?
And he despises him.
Yeah.
But later on, he's changed after seeing him in himself.
Yeah.
And he's there. He's like, I want this job.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. And again, it's a good positive message, and I think it's something that modern writers could learn from so well, is that to hold a grudge, it's kind of irrelevant, really. Once you come to terms with things, and you sort out your differences, whatever they may be, whether it be an internal one, it becomes an external one then, because he shakes hands with Picard.
Yeah.
It's done. It's finished. It's over with. There's no, holding a grudge sort of thing or anything like that.
In terms of an hour and a half long episode, not a huge amount happens.
No.
Really. Well, it does. Early on.
Yeah.
And then not much happens for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then it happens again near to the end.
And very much a hallmark of Michael Piller, who co-wrote the pilot for Deep Space Nine with Rick Berman. Co-created it, sorry. I think Rick co-wrote it as well. But anyway, Michael Piller was very much somebody who was in favour of character development and that kind of thing, as well as messages and all that sort of morality tales, all that kind of thing. And that it stands out as being one of Michael Piller's best scripts. One of the best stories. Far more to talk about with Deep Space Nine as we'll go on. We are going to watch some more, and I'm really keen for you to see where the series goes, because it is the fanboy in me. Deep Space Nine is my favourite. It's a fantastic series. It's so well rounded in terms of its characters, its story arcs, all kinds of things, But we'll leave that one there for now. We'll move on to Voyager, because it's interesting. I said to you about what you thought, comparing those two initially.
Yes.
How you felt, because your first observation that it felt quite slow. The pilot of Deep Space Nine, even though it's still a good story.
Boring.
No, not boring. It felt. Yeah, it seemed to take a while, didn't it? And whereas the Voyager is very much sort of in there and moving.
Voyager has a full story in it, and Deep Space Nine just sets up the story basically. Yeah,
but it's interesting because you also said that you thought better character development in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, Voyager didn't really have that much.
Yeah,
it's
very tokenistic, isn't it?
It's like easy characters.
Easy, yeah. This is the one that is this. This is the one that is that, and you could argue that character development's not a big thing in Voyager as the series goes on. A lot of fans out there, I'm sure, would argue with that one. If you hold it up against Deep Space Nine, definitely there's far less character development in the entirety of Voyager than there is in the entirety of Deep Space Nine. But in terms of setting up a good, solid story, you will see, as you see more Voyager as well, that it didn't necessarily deliver on that promise. But that initial premise of being stuck in the Delta Quadrant,
it's a good setup.
It's a good setup. Yeah. You got the introduction of the Kazon and the Ocampa and the Caretaker, and how he's been pulling people there to try and keep his species alive, so that he can look after the Ocampa and that kind of thing. Again, representation and all that. First full-time female captain. There has been many female captains before in Star Trek, but this is the first time that this is a lead character. Kate Mulgrew playing the role. Likeable character, strong, reliable, resourceful, not emotionally detached, and sort of, because you see that in talking to Mark, her fiance, on the view screen and on the comm system and all that, before she leaves. So that's the good touches, nice touches, and I believe that was Jerry Taylor who was involved with the creation of Voyager, very much pushed for those strong female characters, and she was a strong advocate of pushing Janeway and that kind of character, and more so making her a likeable character as well, making her somebody that people could relate to. And she had her ups and downs as the series went on, but generally I still hold to my opinion that Janeway is very much a likeable character and an example of a really strong female role model, that sort of thing. So.
And they do make a bit of effort to make her seem human as well.
Yeah.
Obviously not as much as Cisco's development
early
on.
That's right.
But they, like the stuff with a dog and her...
Yeah, the dog and her boyfriend.
Boyfriend or husband
fiance,
or whatever. Fiance,
I said boyfriend, but your fiance,
Yeah.
And also in the way she talks to the crew as well, when she meets, Tom Paris is a felon, he's in prison, and yet she's still respectful to him. And
well, even when she meets up with the terrorists, basically, she still treats them with respect. Not like...
Chakotay was a former Starfleet officer, and she's still respectful of them. She doesn't
she does also say that she's going to make an effort to get to know them all properly.
Yeah.
Not just be like a superior officer and
that's right. Very much so. Yeah. And that's something that I think the writers were very conscious of. It was something of a criticism of Next Generation and that was something that was brought home in the episode Lower Decks later in Next Generation, where you saw life on board the Enterprise from the perspective of some of the junior officers, and the bridge crew were very much sort of on the edge of the story. And people do wonder sometimes how much Picard knew of the rest of his crew, how many of his crew did he know. Same goes for Riker and Troy, and how many of their crew or their immediate officers, and that's it. Obviously, if you're on a ship with 1,000 people on board, it's going to be difficult to know everybody, that kind of thing. But Voyager's only like 100 and some odd crew, so there's better chance for Janeway to get to know her crew and all that kind of thing. And she says that in the episode. I must take the time to, what she says about what she knows about Harry Kim as well, and he's playing the clarinet and all that kind of thing. And yeah.
I mean, especially considering how long they're going to be on the ship.
Well, yeah.
Have they 75 years to get back?
Yeah, initially, yeah. Stuck in the Delta Quadrant, and 7-year journey in terms of the series. But in hindsight, looking back on it, did she really ever get to know her crew the way she really should have done? I don't know. Over 7 years, but that's nitpicking.
Yeah. So. As a premise for it didn't just do a kind of lazy Star Trek story.
No,
it went for some a bit like to make you think at least like what's going on.
Yeah.
Because they didn't just do like here's an alien.
Yeah.
Stop it from killing you.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It certainly keeps you interested all the way through. One of the things that I do like about that story is it doesn't ever sort of meander that much.
Yeah, you
don't really... A few the slower moments here and there, but by and large it keeps you with the story.
You don't know what's going on really, and you slowly find out.
Yeah. Right then, so Enterprise, created by Brannon Braga and Rick Berman in around about 2000-ish, so after Voyager had finished. First thoughts?
It's very different because, well, it's not very different. It is and it isn't. Like, it's
different from anything from the tone of everything that's come before with Star Trek, up to that point. It still feels like Star Trek, yeah.
It still feels like Star Trek, but it is different. Like, all the technology seems more sort of our time than...
Which is a product of when the series is set, I suppose. And there was a conscious decision to try and do that, make the characters more contemporary, slightly more contemporary, the technology a bit more contemporary. So, yeah.
And, like, you see they're not as in the Next Generation, they're like, we talked about before, like, the Federation, and they're, like, all above petty things.
Yeah.
And they're not quite at that point yet.
Yeah.
Like, they're constant, like, the Vulcans are just like, you're not
ready to go. You're not logical like us. You're not
just
ready to go out there and
making petty comments to them all the time.
Yeah.
That shows
you have a tendency to be gregarious, T'Pol says, and all those kinds of things, and
they make a conscious effort to. I mean, well, I'm assuming they made a conscious effort to make it seem like it is set when it's set.
People have talked about how the Vulcans could be a lot more emotional in Enterprise as it goes on than in other incarnations of Vulcan depictions in other incarnations of Star Trek. But yes and no. But what I liked about that was that we talked about these very stoic characters, like a certain somebody in Star Trek Discovery, whose name shall go unmentioned here. Those fundamentally detached completely from their human emotions, and when they are showing emotions, it's like bizarre, crazy town sort of type behaviour. But we also talked about other characters that started out a bit sort of like detached. I mean, 7 of 9 is a good example of that initially when she first is deep-Borgified. But we said about T'Pol in this episode, and I asked you let's compare T'Pol, for example, to She Who Will Not Go Named, and whether you thought she was like Ice Maiden, sort of aloof, detached. But there's moments there with T'Pol.
She goes against the logic.
And what her people are trying to do with Starfleet, and that prevent them from going out exploring.
She should have returned
the ship to Earth. Yeah.
And she doesn't. When he's left behind, she could go back, but she goes back for him at the end, knowing that the ship could get destroyed. Yeah,
and she modified the sensors as well, so they could pick up the trail of the warps. So hello, little bird.
So I don't think them saying that's quite accurate, really.
Yeah. But it just goes to show how you can write these characters that are emotionally detached a bit sometimes, but still strong and not unlikable, I wouldn't go as far as to say likeable initially, because T'Pol does become a very likeable character as the series goes on. But I certainly wouldn't have. I recall even the first time I watched Broken Bow, I didn't think, oh, she's an unlikable character.
There aren't really any that I immediately disliked.
No,
so.
There's very few characters in any of the pilots that I've ever looked at them and thought, I really don't. That character is really, really annoying. Funnily enough, actually, because we talked about something to do with Deep Space Nine, but when I first, there was one character for me in the pilot episode, which was Quark.
Yeah.
I really grew to like Quark.
Yeah.
You found Quark
quite irritating,
haven't you, in these initial looking at Deep Space Nine? So that's interesting. That I do think he gets. I think he settles down more. He tends to be something of a comedy foil. That is also true to some, very much so, eventually of Neelix in Voyager. He starts out as being like a roguish sort of, jack of all trades sort of thing, but he becomes the comedy foil. And to some degree, so does Dr. Phlox in Enterprise, as it goes on. I mean, you saw that in that episode where he smiles, optimism, and the big CGI smile up his cheek, like the Joker. And I don't know why they feel the need to do that sometimes, to make an overt comic relief character, whereas you can just write comedy into the characters.
They don't need to, really.
No. So I think really, as a sort of general summary of Deep Space Nine, of Voyager and Enterprise. You know, we've pretty much covered the basics. So I don't really think there's a great deal to say. But as somebody who's not, you're still working your way through Star Trek. What is there any sort of gut initial feelings that you felt from watching these three pilots? That I know it's a bit of a weird question to ask, but. Let's put it this way. Oh, sorry, I keep interrupting you. Let's put it another way. Say, for example, because we can sort of look at you as somebody who's almost like kind of watching them for the first time. Certainly with Enterprise.
Yeah, that was the first Enterprise episode.
Voyager to some degree, and Deep Space Nine to some degree. Out of the three, if you was a completely novice, watch it for the first time. Take yourself, imagine yourself back in time. Which of those is more likely to you inspired to carry on watching it?
Probably not going to please a lot of people with it, but I think Enterprise.
Really?
Out of the, I think.
Wow.
Out of all the ones that made me want to, more likely to make me want to put the next episode on, would be Enterprise.
Okay.
I think watching it in the long term, Deep Space Nine, because it puts a lot of effort into setting things up.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I think at completion, I think that would be the one where, if I was going to sink a lot of time into it, that would be the one that I
That's
would
the reason why I've asked you that question at this point now with the pilot point, because I'm always curious to see what people think initially as which one has the most potential. I'm sort of with you. I didn't really attach myself to Deep Space Nine when I first watched it, which is almost sacrilege saying that.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to warm to Deep Space Nine. It was well into season 2 before I really thought this is a show that I'm really committed to watching now.
Yeah.
I almost completely stopped watching at a midpoint in season 1 because I just felt like it was a lukewarm reheating of the Star Trek franchise, but just took a different direction. And I liked the characters. I did like the characters, but I felt that the overall potential for the series, the overall premise of the series, the stories potentially, was going nowhere. There was no big wow things, but there did start to be some big wow things as towards the end of season 1. Duet is a fantastic episode, and In the Hands of the Prophets as well, and things like that, episodes like that, and going into season 2. But Voyager, interestingly, should have been the one that potentially, and Enterprise to some degree as well, where you think, oh, this really could go somewhere, and then you're kind of waiting for it to go somewhere, and it kind of just peters out. Voyager wasted so many potential opportunities in its run to develop things really well, story arcs. The Kazon thing was just something that just kept meandering along, and then it just disappeared. But I do like some of the Kazon stories, the Seska stuff for fans of Voyager out there. You know, it's great stuff. And then it kind of petered along. Then they took Kess away, and they brought 7 of 9 in, and then you had the Voyager stuff, and then you had the Hirogen stuff, and the Malon and all that. Some brilliant stuff through season 4 and season 5. And then, again, wasted opportunities. They took Voyager into other parts of the space, which theoretically should have been way beyond Hirogen space, but then the Hirogen turn up again. You know, so what that's all about, I don't know. But you know, and another species the same. So it's kind of like the internal continuity and the wasted opportunities. They didn't waste those opportunities with Deep Space Nine, whereas they very much did with Voyager. That's why I'm interested in seeing what you think from the pilot point of view. Yeah. Okay then, so do you want to, should we rate them?
Yeah.
So we'll start with Deep Space Nine Emissary.
I think
out of 10.
I feel like this is a weird one where after I've watched more, my rating of the first episode would go up, and I would appreciate it more because I'd have seen where Sisko's gone.
Yeah.
Seeing how he started to where he's gone, but alone, it's kind of hard to do that.
Yeah.
So
I get that. Yeah.
I think I'd give it maybe a 6.5.
Wow, that's weird. Okay.
Is that also what you're going to give?
Yes, sort of. Well, it is strange how you and I are very much sort of, for somebody who's watched them so many times and then you're watching them anew, we do seem to be visiting the same kind of scores.
He hasn't told me any of his ratings. Okay, this is the first time I'm hearing them.
Yeah, it's about a 6.5 for me. Yeah. Either that or 7, but 6.5, 7, yeah. 6.5, yeah. Okay, Voyager then.
Because the way I'm rating, I'm kind of comparing them to each other.
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, that's really all you can do at the moment. So yeah.
And the thing is, the characters aren't really that great in Voyager, and they're just kind of, well, just from the pilot anyway, they're just sort of whatever. But the story's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to give it the same score on that basis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I do like the characters in Voyager, but they're just nowhere near as well. They don't. That initial potential is not there as it is with Deep Space Nine. But Voyager has a better opening story.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, it's like we're going somewhere else with this. We're doing something different right from the start.
Which I think is what put a lot of people off Deep Space Nine actually at the beginning. Why it lost a lot of the hardcore Trekkies. It developed its own fan base. Deep Space Nine did very much so. For its uniqueness, I could appreciate it from both sides of the argument. I can.
Yeah.
6.5 for me as well with Voyager. Yeah. Yeah. What about Broken Bow then?
We'll ignore the horrible intro.
That was something we didn't. There was two things. Yeah. The theme tune, which was interesting to see the expression on your face. I already knew what I thought of it. I've never liked the theme tune to Enterprise. I'm sorry. I know there's people out there that do like it, believe it or not. But generally, most fans.
It's so out of place. It'd be like, imagine you're at the opera house. Okay, there's some beautiful opera, and then Slipknot come out. It's that out of place. It just doesn't fit
in context.
At all.
No, it doesn't. No. I understood the idea behind the lyrics. You know, I'm going where we're going places that we're not. I'm not going to regurgitate the lyrics, but it's this kind of idea of the wonder of travelling in space and exploring, and it's all new and it's all. But there were better musical motifs they could have used, and I'm not a big fan of Russell Watson, so no, definitely not. And the other scene as well was the gratuitous nipple under the t-shirt.
Why did they do
and
that?
The decontamination thing and all the rest of it. Not that I'm a red-blooded male. Jolene Blaylock, all the right buttons pushed there, but you know.
It's like
it's out of context, isn't it? Yeah.
Was really good friends with a porn director who was a really big fan of Star Trek. Who said, "Can we film something? I won't do just a minute or two."
Ironically, there is some kind of element to what you're saying which has some vague. Right? No, nothing to do with porn directors. Right. Star Trek. There's always been a stigma from non-Star Trek people in the industry, especially, overlooked at it and thought it's cliched. It's sort of a niche audience. It's of its time. It's not contemporary. People have always had that perspective on Star Trek. It needs to be edgy. It needs to be more this. It needs to be more gratuitous. And Enterprise was an attempt to put a little bit more into it.
It was just
but not
funny,
to the point of like decapitating baby heads and Klingon RAPE scenes. And
I mean, could you imagine if like Picard and Riker had come back from a mission and then they start like
the decontamination job.
They just start like filling each other up for no reason.
Now 7 of 9, I'm all for that.
Not Picard and
not Picard. No.
It was very out of place.
Yeah. I think it was just. I mean, there are some great naked scenes with Jolene Blaylock in Enterprise. Again, I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of people out. You're not allowed to be a red-blooded male these days, but in hindsight, looking back on it, does it stick out like a sore thumb? Is that the right term even to use?
Like a cold nipple.
There are things that when I watched it, first of all, I was surprised by them. I thought it was a bit sort of like, okay, whatever. I'm not, I'm no prude, so it didn't worry me. But it never felt like they'd overstepped a line. In Star Trek,
it didn't overstep a line.
It never felt like this is unacceptable. This is not what Star Trek is about. Unlike things that are happening nowadays, but
was just quite weird. They come back from a mission and then just do.
Yeah, I understand the idea behind
Yeah.
it is that you've got to in the technology
fine.
much more simpler, but
Why did it have to be so erotic?
Just showing it, yeah. But there you go. That's what it is. So
Yeah.
if that floats your boat, then each to their own. Each to their own. Did we score it?
No, this was that conversation.
Based on that conversation, maybe we should be scoring it higher. 10 out of 10. Go on then.
I think, in terms of an initial episode, it is better than the other two. It sets it up as being like they're new to all this. This is the first time they're going out in a big ship or anything, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you were the first time you saw it, but I'm quite excited to see them meeting the new races. Just the way they set them up.
Yeah.
Like the characters up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always believed that Star Trek should be about going forwards, not backwards. So I did initially have some reservations about that. But when I watched the pilot episode, I was like, yeah, I could watch this, and I did stick with it, and I did watch it all the way through to the end, even the last episode, which we'll get into in another video. These are the Voyagers, but yeah, it could have been far worse. It could have been better, but as a series, and certainly as a pilot episode, it holds its yeah. So what score?
I think I'll give it a 7.
Yeah.
It's a bit better than the other two.
It's a bit better.
Yeah.
7. Yeah. Only on that initial pilot promise, and I'm sure there are people out there who would do. Please feel free in the comments, to voice your own opinions on if you think reasons why you feel that perhaps the Deep Space Nine pilot was better, or the Voyager pilot was better, or that the Enterprise pilot was awful. But on that initial take of that, I'm sort of trying to put my mind back in that position of just
because you have to
ignoring the
bear
rest.
in mind, that's the first Enterprise I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's the first full Voyager episode I've seen, and I've seen a couple of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
So I'm basically blind to this. So
Yeah.
I've just got that and no extra context. So
It should be great to see how you feel about it as we've watched more. Yeah, to look back on that pilot at that point then and think
yeah.
But I think you should take it on the basis of what it is at that point in time. Rate it based on in its own right as opposed to anything else that it has any bearing on with any series. So yeah. Okay then, so I think we'll leave that there for today. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for joining us. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you can, and like the video as well. And Dan and I will see you in the next video.
Yes, goodbye.